And this is just a few of the things I've set down here, and I want you to, if you want to make a note of it, you can. These are things to look at in the light of this, the overall prophecy in the book of Revelation. As I said this morning, the world doesn't have time to put together a new world order to make it try to fulfill a beast or something of that nature, the way the carnal man would think of it. First off, keep in mind, there can be a lot of things that such an effort brought about by politicians can be done to slip upon society. But a lot of this New World Order is just a front put out here by one element of Satan to distract people's attention, while the other thing is coming on just so progressively. And one day the world wakes up to realize, there it is. And there goes this other thing. It's just a scarecrow. Now, this is in a short way. Time-wise, these are 6 things that you can use. In the book of Revelation, when it speaks about the 4th horse rider, we are living right now in the time when that 4th horse is riding. That horse does not have another 25 or 30 years to ride without it sooner or later has got to materialize and do what it says in this 4th seal. And it plainly tells you, brothers and sisters, that power was given to it over the 4th part of the earth. Now, does that sound like a global power? What does it tell you? Power was given to it over the 4th part of the earth to kill with sword, with famine, and such things. That's not a global picture. Number 2, when we think of this woman in Revelation 12, we might ask ourselves the question, what was the purpose of 2 wings of an eagle being given to her to fly somewheres if she was going to wind up in just as bad an environment as where she came from? What does it say? The earth opened up and swallowed the flood, and the earth helped the woman. Well, now, you know, brothers and sisters, the word earth there has to be symbolic of another area of people, unrelated to the old world, where the sea is symbolic of the old world picture where the first beast is at. Number 3, all these signs that Jesus spoke of in Matthew 24 have got to culminate in a generation of time. Another 25 years from now, brothers and sisters, takes it beyond any of the Holocaust Jews being left alive. They just had a gathering over there in Poland. How many heard about that in the news? At the old Auschwitz extermination place. Jews gathered there that experienced that. And they were already past their middle age. I grant you there was a lot of the young ones there, but they weren't in that. They were there just because of the relatives that were. You go another 25 years, you take it completely out of the Holocaust realm of Jews. That puts it all together in another generation. Revelation 16, it speaks there about the kings of the east being brought somewheres, and it says, and he brought them into a place called Armageddon. In some of this material that I was taking this stuff from the last 2 messages, the Far East and the Orient is the part of the world that's the new, fastest growing economies there is on the face of the earth. That's why from Korea, come on into Japan, into China. Everything's coming alive. And it's going to be a fact, brothers and sisters, one of these days, the United States that have kept troops in Korea and all over the Orient, they're going to lose out. We will be compelled by conditions and circumstances to pull our troops home and to say to the Orients, you're on your own. Then, brothers and sisters, you can rest assured there will be enough time for them to mass and put together their own philosophy, because when they come to Armageddon, they will all come under one flag. Number 5, Jerusalem now is a focal point. It's like a fuse in the Middle East. Jerusalem Post brought out Friday. Perez has done said in Rabin, we will not stop our building in the great Jerusalem perimeter, but we will slow up. That tells you, brothers and sisters, there's no way that the Arab government is going to give in and let old Jerusalem become the city that the PLOs make the capital. It's got to be retained. So just think of Zechariah 12. In that day, God says he will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling. And you're looking at the era of time. That's not another 25 years off. That's just in front of us somewhere. And number 6, you can't put the 7 thunders off another 25 years. That would take it completely out of the realm of the people that heard the original 6. Now think it over. And none of these things will this charismatic TV bunch of preachers ever even touch on. They're so wrapped up in New World Order, it's pitiful. Now that's just only a small amount. Now then, there was an article in today's paper about the New World Order and some things right now that's going on in America. I will read some of it tonight if we have time, just to let you know how the carnal man feels, who has no Bible, who has not even a glimpse of really what you and I see. He's got to then react by how he sees things going on in the world about him. And there is an alarming spirit right now in North America. There's thousands upon thousands of people getting tired of having the wool pulled over their eyes. And with that in mind, let's just begin to think seriously. Just how much longer do we really have before all these things really begin to come together and the world is really going to be thrown in right? Well, we're going to see this thing right here, brothers and sisters, as it really is. And now tonight, I want to deal with this lamb beast. So turn with me in Revelation 13. We read about this first beast this morning, and how he opened his mouth in blaspheming against God. And in the 5th verse, and there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things. We expressed that. And blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue, means pick up and go on. There is no such thing, brothers and sisters, as a new world order being the continuation of something that's previously already existed. It's something completely new. So this continue here, brothers and sisters, has got to be related right in here, because it has one head wounded and the wound was healed. And the UN, there's nothing been wounded about it. It is strictly an organization of world nations and politicians. That's the carnal side of man's thinking, who don't even see the Bible. And it almost disgusts you to think how that we'll have our own politicians, as ornery as they are. They'll get up this morning and dress in their Sunday go-to-meeting clothes and get in their limousines and went to the church. You might say, for what purpose? When in actuality, brothers and sisters, they want to put on a show that they believe in God. But they don't believe in God to the point that they're going to let God intervene in their carnal political affairs. They got their own ideas, and they're bent on carrying them out. If any man went right up to Washington, D.C., brothers and sisters, and began to preach on the streets a message of prophecy that really come down the line and expose this stuff, you could rest assured the news media would have it. They'd be trying to squelch a thing. We don't want this fanaticism to go on by like this. So now then, let's come on down here. Verse 8. And all that dwell upon the earth. Now think seriously. The word earth there, does that literally mean the whole planet? It does not. It's that portion of prophetic earth. That's all symbolized in this whole thing. Because this thing right here, if you had a world map, a flat world map that showed all the continents of the world, you'd see that all these symbolic representations covers the Middle East, that portion of Asia, Europe, North Africa. That's where the Bible, that's where history had its origin and beginning. That's the part of the earth we're talking about. You cannot have the whole earth global, turn right around and use another verse of Scripture, and the gray horse has power over 1/4 part of the earth. You got a contradiction. All these passages of Scripture have got to fit together for a period of time that's referred to as the Great Tribulation period. That's the last half of Daniel's 70th week. Now, in verse 11, this is not a picture of how John saw the new world in the Middle Ages. It hadn't been discovered. This is how he saw the new world here in the 20th century. As it appears, it's already been discovered. It's already got its identity. And he's describing what it looks like. So he's looking at an altogether different geographical spot of the planet. That's the way we've got to look at it. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, not the sea. So the fact that this was coming up out of something that looked earthwise, soil, shows that it's something separate from that which is symbolized as a big body of water. And he had 2 horns like a lamb. This is characteristic, we can see, of the overall social, political nature of the American nation in its birth and its progress through the years of time. It's been said, America is the one Christian nation in the world. She has not sought to take territorial powers over anything. She looked at things different altogether than other nations. While other nations was out to grab a slice of the world, it was not so with America. America through the years have been used at intervals of time to move in out of necessity when they're perceived to be an element of people under, we will say, terrible situations of poverty, being depressed, and such like. That's why the Spanish-American War was fought. Conditions in the Philippines had got to a very bad state. We went there, brothers and sisters, to kick out them Catholic dictators and warlords, and we took over the islands. And that's why, brothers and sisters, Spain was the first there. She went there as a Catholic power of Europe. Her influence was there for several many decades. But that Catholic spirit, just like in South America, has so entwined itself in the political leadership of them islands, life was a very much of a turmoil. We went in there and took it over to deliver them from the oppression. That's why we have Puerto Rico today. The same thing was going on. And it is a fact. In 1957, when we was down there, we had various Cuban people as we was invited into their homes. They said to us, because that was just right before Castro come out of the mountains, which then was in June 58. And they said, we wish the United States would take us over because we don't know what's about to happen. And there, brothers and sisters, as we come out of the year of 57 into 58, in the month of June, here come Castro out of the mountains. And we see what has went on there, brothers and sisters. And that's why we've got boatload after boatload after boatload of Cubans, and some of them are cutthroats. I saw in the news the other day where this last great big exodus that occurred, finally we made some of them go to Panama, and Panama has opened up their mouths and cried, we don't want them here no more. It showed our big cargo planes and our soldiers there to take them back to Guantanamo Bay, to hold them there, to eventually take them and deport them back to Cuba. And they was interviewing some of these refugees, and I heard one of them Cubans actually saying that Bill Clinton's nothing but like a pig to put us here like this and not let us come on to the States. Now, brothers and sisters, barring all racial feelings and such like, the American nation you live in cannot continue to be a refuge and a haven of the world's refugees for the next 50 years. You can only add a burden on a horse's back so much, and it'll come to the place the last straw breaks his back. And it's a tragedy, brothers and sisters. Yes, many people in America, but our country's made up of immigrants. That can be true. But you're going to have to realize one of these days, the world is fast growing into an overpopulated state. And you cannot open up the borders and expect to receive it all. If you do, you will have yourself sinking in the quagmire of absolutely nothing but decay and social disorder. Because America will become like a dead carcass full of maggots. It's true. When America was a large continent, scarcely inhabited other than the Indians, yes, our country was made up of immigrants from all corners of the world, but they came here to make a nation, to make a new beginning. They didn't come here to just be Chinese and have a little Chinese center with self-government. They weren't even crying, brothers and sisters, that the Chinese language become a universal dialect here. But that's what they want today. They want us to be absolutely obligated to teach Spanish, to teach other dialects in our school, in our nation, all because there's thousands of them here today. They didn't come here to be Americans. They're less like up in Canada, that Quebec province. They ought to kick old de Gaulle out of there years ago when he came there and made that speech that caused Quebec to begin to act like they do. Now, this land beast is another part of the earth's planet, and it's the New World, where a nation, and I'm going to say this tonight, this includes Canada, because as I read right there, you'll see why I'm saying this. And I beheld another beast come up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb. That shows, we will say, that's pertained to his Christian, this nation's Christian, we will say, influence or characteristics about it. But watch. What happens? And he, this lamb beast, spake as a dragon. Now keep in mind, read it as it says. A dragon, not the dragon. It's the dragon here gave him his seat and his power and his great authority. That's the devil's empire. How many sees that? That's the devil's primary objective. Getting that restored, getting it built back, so it can again have a little period of time in the world to fulfill what we will say, time, prophetic-wise, will allow it. So the devil is the master of this one. He's the architect. He's the designer of this. Every bit of this is an embodiment of satanic power. That's why the whole world worship the devil, the dragon, that give this power unto that. But when you come over here, yes, we can say it's the same devil, but you've got to realize it is only secondary. That's why it speaks as a dragon, not the dragon. This is not the devil's primary instrument. Here's his main objective. This is secondary, but it's a means how to obtain certain things for this to be brought about. And he exercises all the power of the first beast before him and causes the earth. Now again, the word earth is symbolic. Does this mean the global planet? It does not. But it literally means, brothers and sisters, that part of the earth that's basically related to this. We're going to see that after a while. Because of the earth and them which dwell therein, to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. That's a long ways from being a new world order. Won't you say so? It's an old world dressed up in a modern suit of clothes. All because the original people that lived under what it was old pagan Rome, under the papacy, they're dead. They can't tell you how it was to live there. When the head was wounded, we came through 2 or 3 generations, and not a living soul is alive today to tell you how life was under old Papal Rome. And even they want to get the histories out of the libraries that even tells you. So that lets you know, brothers and sisters, the devil has really got people hoodwinked. But now as we look at this Lamb, he causes the whole world to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. Now we've got to break this down and look at America. Just how did this Lamb beast go about this? Verse 13, and he doth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on earth in the sight of men. Now, brothers and sisters, I can say at this time from that verse, that sets a line right across the yardstick of time. You've got to look at this, how this was all coming together after World War II came to close. Because no other time prior to World War II did America have the power to bring such atomic, devastating powers by strategic bombers and rockets until after World War II. At no other time had any nation seen any nation have such a military capability to devastate a continent as it did 2 cities in Japan. And to think we got a bunch of characters up in Washington, D.C. that wanted to keep them from putting that B-29 in there, the Enola Gay, as a point of history. All of them are liberal perverts that wants to turn America into a hellhole and make America look like she's a bloodthirsty beast, all because she dropped the atomic bomb. Every last one of them ought to have been at Pearl Harbor when that battleship Arizona went down and thousands of them sailors was caught below deck in the ammunition in the gun rooms when she sank, and their bodies are still there today. Verse 13 is not a description that fits some of your charismatic preachers that this beast is some man born in the Middle East by a harlot, full of the devil, growing up to be a false prophet, having someday supernatural powers to call fire out of heaven. That's their philosophy. But it's just as crazy, brothers and sisters, as the minds who even perceive such an idea. These miracles right here are not they're not supernatural miracles of that origin, but they're scientific miracles that a nation for a period of time holds in its hand, capable of devastating it, while at the same time it's telling the world, rebuild the first beast, restore the first beast. And brothers and sisters, if you know anything about the history of Europe and its reconstruction since 1948, you have to see it's America, brothers and sisters, not only with her martial aid, but think, brothers and sisters, then when we designed the NATO alliance. Yes, and while NATO was a primary military means that Europe had, as we will say, a defensive force against the onslaught of communism in Russia, we had that capability of delivering atomic warfare and putting it anywhere in the world. We had strategic bombers on the runways loaded every 24 hours of the day. And there was constantly, for months on end, brothers and sisters, some of them was ready to take off on a minute's notice. And when NATO was formed, Canada had troops that fulfilled their duties. They were allotted in Europe, along with American troops. They spent their allotted time in Europe. For what purpose? Yes, it says, to cause the whole earth to worship the first beast. But the word worship didn't mean they was all down on their knees worshiping an idol. No. They were literally, brothers and sisters, so bent on interested in seeing Europe restored and reconstructed. To them, it was to give them a sense of material and social and economic security. They cared less whether God was recognized in it or not. So when you see a society like that, you've got to recognize they either worship God or the devil. All they want is a material and a tangible kingdom they can hold to and trust in for security. And it's this lamb beast that did it. And you cannot say the Orients had one dime or dollar invested in this. That's why, brothers and sisters, this global thing, you don't make it a global thing. You got to keep it right in the territories where the thing originally was at in the first place. Now, so verse 13, and he doth great wonders. Yes, scientific wonders. Look in the 60s, brothers and sisters. We were in a race with Russia. For what purpose? To put a man on the moon. And we succeeded. In fact, we put other men on the moon. Other landings took place. After we was able and capable of putting a man on the moon, then, brothers and sisters, is when this lamb beast succeeded in launching communicative satellites. We already had, brothers and sisters, television, but it was on the spot, and the signals were sent by cable. But after that, brothers and sisters, the cable became an outdated thing, because it wasn't long then, brothers and sisters. We were letting other international hookups come through the satellite, and they would plainly tell you, this announcement is coming to you, or this picture is coming to you by satellite. We begin to put these satellites in space, and they begin to give the world immediate contact with what was going on halfway around the world, or completely on the other side. And from that era to now, brothers and sisters, it has put these, not only satellite things in space for television, but satellite things in space to bounce telephone signals off of. And that's why, brothers and sisters, you can dial Norway, you can dial Africa, you can dial to Australia, and the voice comes through just as clear as it was in the other side of the wall in your house. All because interspace communications. These are the miracles, but they're scientific. They're not supernatural in the sense of somebody standing out there says, hocus pocus, and bingo, and here comes a streak of fire coming out of the sky. That's all absolutely, brothers and sisters, just so much carnal speculation that people want to use like that. Now from verse 13, let's go on to 14 and begin to see what happens. Now this lamb beast in verse 14, and he deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles. So you've got to look at the years from World War II, coming to the 60s, 70s, 80s, right on to now. Which he had power to do in the sight of the beast. What beast? The first beast. Saying to them that dwell on the earth. And I want to say this, brothers and sisters, listen. To them that dwell on the face of the earth. Again, this is strictly not a completely global, planet thing. That they dwell on the earth by the means of the miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live. Now, that's got a certain formula for identification. This image. Now, some people could say, that could be the United Nations. The United Nations is a political body of nations. It does not even have a religious orientation to it. How many realize that? And there is not a political horn on here wounded. It wasn't one of the horns wounded, which are represented in its political national identity. It's one of the heads was wounded, a form of government. So the image has got to reflect something that brings out how that old papal power had control over this. So we can say it's got to be the World Council of Churches, which is none other than uniting, organizing, reconstructing the apostate organizations of Protestantism that existed in the earth. Now let me say this. At no time did an act of Congress, at no time did any senator or congressman bring up a bill. I think we ought to put this before the legislation that all churches in the United States should join into one body. It don't even exist. You've got to understand as you read this lamb beast, you've got to see that there was a period of time when that devil that did begin to work his way into a position of leadership. He was already out here mixing into the society of America as the society of America begins to go into apostasy. This gives the devil an opportunity. And his objective is, I'll use this little nation that's been a Christian nation for all these years, that did not want to fight other nations, did not want to have any territorial powers outside of its own jurisdiction. But now then that it's beginning to lean into apostasy, I will come in and slip into its society, and I will work my way up through its leadership. And I will cause things to come about here the way I want it over here. The World Council of Churches was not designed by the federal government of the United States. How many realize that? But time on earth had come to the point Satan was going to be allowed to take control of these apostate Protestant systems. They were pure and clean when the Spirit of God moved on people, and they come out of something to embrace the truth. But it goes to show, brothers and sisters, as we're coming into the 40s and 50s, even the Pentecostal movement is heading down the road for apostasy. That's why when we read about from Azusa Street till now, we can see exactly right where that move of the Spirit began to go into the clutches and the hands. And God then used that anointing to begin to mislead, we will say, and deceive the hierarchy of the religious system. The United States government had nothing to do with it. It was not brought about by federal legislation. It was brought about by a spirit already within Protestant denominations. They began to be dealt with by Satan because time in the Scripture was showing there's going to be a uniting of God's people. And we can say this, as God sent a messenger on the scene, right about the same time as God sends a messenger on the scene to begin to call his people out that's going to be his bride, the dirty devil begins to work, brothers and sisters, to unite these apostate Protestant denominations to bring them all back into one unified body. That's the way we've got to look at it. And may I say this, I have the book that declares the charter. And the book is titled, From Amsterdam to Nairobi. The charter was drawn up in Amsterdam, Holland in 1948. Why? That was the place chosen to draw it up because it was from Amsterdam, Holland, our first pioneers carrying the Christian faith began to set sail across the ocean to the New World. How many realize that? And that's why Amsterdam, Holland was chosen. But that was where the charter was formed. That's where the denominational leaders, all the way from North Africa, from India, they assembled there. But I believe it was in 1954, which was 6 years later, at Wheaton, Illinois. There's where the second conference set. And there, not out of the treasury of the United States, it was not a legislative act at all by the federal government of the United States. It was these Protestant, ecclesiastical, apostate leaders who are blind as a bat, can't even read the Bible and see it in its prophetic message. They only saw the need for uniting. And there at Wheaton, Illinois, there was where sums of money was pledged from various other organizations that was already collaborating and working to help bring about the unifying of this great body of Protestant society. At the time, the Catholic Church was just looking on. But today, the Catholic Church is a member of the World Council of Churches. And right in some of them books, brothers and sisters, that talks about the moving of the Spirit now in the charismatic realm, even some of these men in the charismatic field, they look upon the World Council of Churches as a counterfeit. Because they see something other wrong with the World Council of Churches. They have a right to. Because actually, brothers and sisters, it's God's way of binding tares together. Because it's apostate. But we can say this on the other standpoint. This anointing, as it moves amongst another segment, it's going to take your Pentecostal organizations and bind the organizational structure just as tight right in there with that, brothers and sisters. It's only the foolish virgins that somewhere in the future will be able to escape the trap that the devil through that apostate system has set. Now let's continue to read about this image of the beast. Now then, and it is absolutely a reflection of the same beast's government that was wounded by the sword and did live. So if the first is religious, ecclesiastical, papal power, then we've got to understand this image has got to be something that has certain religious characteristics. How many can see that? Now, here is an important thing to look at it in the light of the biblical picture. It tells us right here, brothers and sisters, in this next verse, as I will read it directly. There is a place in the future that this image of the beast is going to speak, and it's going to exercise its power. That would make it look like that the image of the beast will speak from this lamb. That's not the way you read it at all. Let me say this. It would make it look like the image of the beast speaks exclusively from the area where the lamb is at. Just because it was from the area of the lamb, it had power to give life to the image. Life is the economical side of it. But the leaders of this World Council of Churches, most of them come from some of these other apostate nations, and all they're looking at is the economic and the material advantage. It is not ruled from any denominational body in the United States, but it's from the apostate congregations and organizations that's in America that fills their coffers, that supports their objective, while they throughout the rest of the world carry on their own apostate purpose. Because at the head of that world organizational body of religious Protestantism, there are men, brothers, and sisters, they're communists. They don't even believe in the virgin birth. But they are a religious body of apostate, dead, carnal-minded religious people that represents Protestantism. That's why the book was written, From Amsterdam to Nairobi. That's in Kenya. A lot of people don't realize, brothers and sisters, that Protestant missionaries from your European churches after the Reformation struck, and even from America and Canada, they used to go to Kenya, Nigeria. That was their stomping grounds. And when our little Papa visits Africa, tell me where it was he visited. He didn't go to Saudi Arabia, did he? He didn't go to Jordan, did he? He goes to Nigeria. He goes to Kenya. He goes to Ghana. He knows where them Protestant strongholds are at. Now, I'm feeding all that in to let you see a picture of something, brothers and sisters. Now then, and he, yes, the Lamb. It would sound like, brothers and sisters, that you want to take this Lamb nation from the federal standpoint. And he had power to give life into the image. But that's not the way it came. We can see that as we look back on the total picture. It's only after this dragon satanic spirit gets into America and begins to use this nation and its society to create and bring about his satanic objective, and that's to rebuild Europe and get this first beast ready to fulfill her role in the last days. That's what the devil's after. And he's using this nation. For she's blind, she can't see, and so the leaders are no longer like Washington and Abraham Lincoln. They're men, absolutely, brothers and sisters. They'll go and sit in a church pew somewhere and go out, and they're just as ornery and crooked as they can be. So the devil can use any of them he wants to. Now, this verse, I want to read it slow. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast. So when you're addressing the word he in the masculine singular, don't look at the American federal government. You look at the devil that's coming right up in here. Because as I said, not one dime or dollar went to the U.S. out of the U.S. Treasury to support the World Council of Churches. It came from civil social bodies and basically church treasuries that put this thing to life, and that's what supports it today. So it's not an act of federal government. It's how the devil has drained American dead Protestantism and hoodwinked and blinded them, and they don't realize what they're doing. Now, that the image of the beast should both speak, so it's already speaking. It's been speaking for several years. Keep in mind, its final objective has not yet been reached. That's in front. Now, not only speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. That's in the forefront. How many realize that? And that's why I had to read that gray horse rider. Where does his power rule at? He had power over 1/4 part of the earth to kill with sword, with beast, and any other necessary things. And keep in mind, that gray horse is the devil, an antichrist spirit, in one of the most deceptive displays. And it's riding the world tonight. It's not yet reached that point that the World Council of Churches said, okay, if you won't join us, then we'll kill you. So now keep that in mind, brothers and sisters. That's in the forefront. Now, I want to say this. If you could liken from this side to this, and that whole span represents that 7-year period of the week of Daniel. The tribulation period doesn't come until you're right here. That's when the Antichrist, this little fellow right here, breaks the covenant with Israel. That's then when he enters Jerusalem, he sets himself up in the rebuilt temple, and he begins to carry out his satanic aim. And then's when that dark time of trouble, such as there never was before and never shall be hereafter, that Daniel 12 spoke of. It's also Jeremiah, I believe the 30th chapter, a time of trouble, and it's known as Jacob's trouble. That last 3.5 years of time is going to be Israel's darkest hour of human history. That's why we're dealing with this subject, brothers and sisters, to show you this whole time factor from here to here is how God has allowed the Jew to be dealt with because of her turning her back on him. And that's why when Israel was stripped of her king, her temple was torn down, she was started on the road of being chastised, driven into, we will say, universal scatterment and everything. And not until we get down here does the prophecy become complete. And then God will send the Jewish Messiah, who is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And the last king they had was King Zedekiah. And it tells me in one of the prophets, and he will come and take his rightful throne, which is the seat of David, and the law will go forth from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. So keep in mind, this is an hourglass of time. And it's only when the sands are all down in here, brothers and sisters, can we expect all of this here will be culminated. And that is not a global planet picture. That's a Middle East world. How many sees it? Now, but keep in mind, the World Council of Churches, yes, which it would look like it has its birth here, and its headquarters here, and it's from the government of this here that feeds it. But that's not the way it reads. It just means it's from the people of this land beast, which were originally Christian, influenced society. Now that they're becoming apostate, they just shell it out to the devil. And really it's through this monetary mean, the whole world really is worshiping the devil as they see that giant thing coming back into play. That's exactly why, brothers and sisters, have you watched the trend? Immediately after World War II, you did not have many Western leaders trotting off to Rome just to have a talk with the Papa. But when we come to Johnson, it began to change. And ever since then, brothers and sisters, more and more of these Western leaders, they want to trot to Rome. Because it goes to show time has come about. This beast is being healed. Recognition of the Pope is becoming an important factor of the day. That's why, brothers and sisters, on Trinity Broadcast, as these preachers there, they preach prophecy, but they go and talk with the Pope. They have an audience with the Pope. And just because the Pope, brothers and sisters, has now told them that the next Pope will be the rascal, the Antichrist, why, their chest is just filled up like a little bullfrog eating flies. The greatest revelation, oh, the Pope told me so. Well, we've known that a long time. But see, we don't know nothing. Now, let me say this. It is absolutely believed by the Catholic system that the last Pope, whoever he is, will be the last Pope before the coming of the Lord. If we're living close to the end, brothers and sisters, we ain't got time for the world to play around and fuss to bring in motion a new world order. You might get the American people to accept it. You might hoodwink them and keep them in darkness for a little period of time. But you're going to have to keep them pacified while we negotiate with North Korea, Japan, and China, the hordes of the Far East, and they're not going to come trotting to your new world order. Amen. They ain't buying it. You can't even get them to open up and trade honest. So my point is, brothers and sisters, there's no doubt, yes, as this thing comes into play, becomes the actually primary factor in Europe and the Middle East, sure, I can see the Orients trading with it, but I sure don't see the Oriental leaders, brothers and sisters, who their basic religion is Hinduism and Buddhism. I don't see them people coming to Rome and bowing down to this apostate leader. How many understands what I'm talking about? It won't work. So I have to say all of that. It goes to show we keep this picture, brothers and sisters, right where it belongs in the Bible. Now, this image of the beast, the World Council of Churches, along with the Catholic Church, yes, in the last half of Daniel's week, in that sector of the earth, the earth where they have power to fulfill that, they will. They'll be just as bloodthirsty, no doubt, as the Catholic Church has been. How many understand what I said? But does that mean it's going to come from the United States? Not at all. Now let's go on. And he calls us, all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their forehead. Now we're looking at something else. We're looking at the future necessity. And this has got to be understood in the economical sector. So again I can say, yes, from this nation, this lamb beast, here's where the invention, here's where comes the practical usage of the credit card. But as time goes on, we can see there's a monetary change gradually developing. And absolutely, brothers and sisters, as we get closer and closer to this week of Daniel, when the world in which is this will affect will be plunged into this week of time, that portion of the world will absolutely have it all wrapped up and sealed. They will be compelled to go into a cashless society. Why? I heard it said the other day, out of Europe, counterfeit dollar printers are filling the world with counterfeit U.S. currencies. This is beginning to affect our balance of trade and how we trade on the basis of the value of the American dollar. People don't even realize. But the American dollar was not the world stabilizing monetary means until after World War II. It used to be the British pound. But as the world currencies began to slip and slide, we come out of the war period. Reconstruction was primary. Inflation was high. The American dollar became the world's monetary stabilizing force, both of the East and the West. But now, brothers and sisters, as the world sees what the dollar has been in the world at large, this causes gang of world counterfeiters. Counterfeit this beast's money. Because you can buy anything in China, in Russia, or Europe with it. How long do you think this could go on, brothers and sisters, without this running into a problem? It's a known fact, brothers and sisters. There's only one thing that can absolutely put your counterfeiters at bay. Take all currency out of the picture and use nothing but we will say, the number system. The number debit system takes the nickels out of the pocket and the paper money out of the purse, and everything is absolutely by a certain number. And that's why you see your cash registers today, brothers and sisters, becoming equipped, and we will say the stage is being set for a future era of cashless society. Now, the reason I'm talking on this, back at about 1980 and 81, when there began to be the appearance of certain types of credit cards, here came one from a preacher, and I'll never forget, I referred to it one morning right here in the pulpit. It told about how they was looking at the debit card, the future. It told how, I believe, J.C. Penney's was already bringing on a card, and it had certain numbers about it, and how it would tie into that numerical system, and on and on and on they go. And they was preaching then, brothers and sisters, why this could go in effect in 1982. How close are we to the coming of the Lord? 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95. How many knows what I'm talking about? When they begin to see a little something other that can and will be used over here somewhere in time as the week of Daniel, this portion represents the tribulation. Then they want to get on the bandwagon. Sure, it's going to be. But I said this, there will be no mark of the beast, no cashless society until we're getting close to this week of Daniel. And it will not become an effective thing to the point where human lives are threatened until we get right here. Because, brothers and sisters, that 3.5 year period is a period of time it's going to be hard on society in sectors of the world where such a system is. This is why in Europe, for the past number of 3 or 4 years now, there's been a constant seesaw. They've done got their political unity established. They're all ready to cooperate as a universal army. But they're yet, brothers and sisters, they can't decide and forfeit their currency, sovereignty of their currency. While others, they're wanting one European currency, which they can build their future on. All of that goes to show you, God will not let a cashless society become a dominant factor to any portion of this world until that middle of the week is right. Until then, they will fuss, they will vote, it'll fall through, they'll negotiate. But when that period of time comes, it'll fall right in place. Now, because of that, that leads us to this. Now, and that no man buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. When that hour of time comes, This cashless society is not going to be a global thing. It will be in the portions of the world where this thing has power to set in motion any laws it sees necessary to bring everything under its dominating control. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast. For it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. It's not the number of the image. It's the number of the beast that's right here. How many realize that? But it does go to show that the World Council of Churches will blend right in with it. Back it up. But I have to say, brothers and sisters, that's not a global, universal picture of everybody. You're not going to see that stamped down and put in the Orients. All the time, brothers and sisters, this thing is in power. And that week of Daniel starts the last 7 years of human history as this Western European beast of the Middle East and so forth is riding through time. We come right here. The Orient's brothers and sisters, not because they're planning on it, but God will be letting them kings of the East be preparing for a war, and it's going to be one of the bloodiest wars this planet has ever saw executed on the face of this earth. By the time then mankind has come through the last 3.5 years, as time begins to approach the end, that's why you read in Revelations, and he saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs go out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, and out of the mouth of the dragon. All of that is a trinity in this sense. It means it's time for this whole system, as it has been through here, as it approaches this, God's getting ready to rip and tear it to pieces. Now listen carefully to me. It plainly tells you in the 17th chapter of Revelation that these 10 horns is what will hate the whore that's riding that thing's back. Isn't that the picture? And what does it say these 10 horns will do? They will hate the whore. And it says, and they will gnash her and yank her down. Let me say this. As them 10 horns, in their political identity that's been tied to this thing, there goes your image to the beast also. Why do I say that? Because when you turn to the 19th chapter and you see then the beast, that's this thing right here, and the false prophet, and the kings of the earth, all symbolized here, gather together to make war against him that sits on the white horse. The whore is not in the picture, and neither is the image of the beast in the picture. That goes to show, brothers and sisters, God lets a political uprising come forth because as the Antichrist has used this religious cloak as a tool to deceive the world for this period of time that brought about such devastating bloodshed. By the time this era of time is coming slowly to a close, don't tell me society that's represented in these 10 horns of Europe aren't going to be sick of such a devastation and a bloodbath. That's why, brothers and sisters, we can say again, you cannot go beyond another 20, 25 years. You go beyond that generation that's symbolized there under the 5th seal. And that was the souls of the Holocaust. How long, O Lord, holy and true, Will not thou not avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? And white robes was given to every one, and said, Rest a little season, till thy fellow brethren should be killed as you are. That lets you know, brothers and sisters, you don't go from that fifth seal and that Holocaust victim of 6 million Jews and go a complete generation and let that next thing hit. That's why, brothers and sisters, many of these passages of prophecy, they all dovetail, and they've got to add to a certain picture. Only certain words will carry that passage of Scripture to a certain point in the prophetic picture. That's why you cannot make a global thing out of it. Now then, I want to bring it to a certain point. I realize tonight, America in the last 40 years or 50 years since World War II, it's become a terrible image from what it was under Washington, under Lincoln, and under former leaderships of the nations we've had. I mean, the hours of time we've had in the past. But you can see since World War II, it was primarily out of North America, was the spirit of Satan to use the society, to use the religious wealth to foster this picture. But it went to rebuild this. When we come over here, brothers and sisters, and we see then, how then, and it caused the whole world to receive a mark and so forth. That's not an act of the U.S. federal government. You've got to understand, brothers and sisters, that becomes a tool in the hand of the Antichrist. Because keep in mind, the Pope of Rome did not design the world computer. I did not know until it's been about a year now. There was a documentary on one night, and it was all on the computer. The computer was originally designed back in the closing years of World War II by the United States military, we will say, your inventors. It was an instrument made and designed exclusively to fire naval guns and big artillery pieces, to figure data, the distance, the trajectory, and all of this. A computer can do in a second's time what the hand and the brain of a human being would take a minute or so. Never did they think the computer would be anything more. But out of it came something, and men began to play with it. It wasn't long, brothers and sisters. They was using it to file data on it. But now look what they're doing with it. And brothers and sisters, it's right at the threshold, we can say, of the final peak the computer will no doubt reach, as we brought out in them other two messages. When you can sit in your modern home, switch the button. If you want to take a trip and see the Chinese wall, high in the sky, giant telescopes beaming down. You want to see the wall of China? You can sit right there and watch it. Now, all of that tells me, brothers and sisters, we are living in the greatest peak of human intelligence. Daniel 12 says, and knowledge shall be increased. The computer brings forth knowledge, information, like lightning. Anybody in the world can zero in on it. So there's no way you can keep a secret anymore, hardly. Now, Jackie got on the computer. It's the only way I figured I could find out something other for this other portion I'm going to be dealing with. Here's the breakdown of the Jewish population in the world. The Jewish population in the United States is 5,160,000. The Jewish population in Canada is 1,843,000. That makes a total population of Jewish people in North America 7,003,000. Now think of that picture, that number, 7,003,000. The total world population is 17,822,000. So almost half of the world's population of Jewry is in Canada and the United States. Now I ask a simple question. Why is that? Why is that? Now, the number of Jews in the Holy Land is 4,082,725, which makes them a total picture, both in Israel, United States, and Canada, 11,085,725. So that takes you over half of world Jewry. That leaves then, brothers and sisters, an uncensored number of 6,736,275 unaccounted for, actually, as to where they're all scattered, but they're scattered throughout the rest of the whole world. Now, I'm going to read to you. You might get bored, but I'm going to try to make it interesting. How come all these Jews are here? What drew them here? How come it is the North American Jew, he's the wealthiest Jew on earth? For centuries of time, he has been looked upon almost like a cur dog. He's been looked upon by peoples of other nations as a scourge in their society. His religious beliefs in what he ate, his manner of social behavior, made him talked about, ridiculed, even persecuted. Because he was looked on like he was an idiot. It's just the way he projects himself. Now I've got excerpts here that I've marked in this book. This is, I said this morning, this is written by a Jew. It's got excerpts right out of people's diary who were the participators of this great exodus that occurs between 1800 and 1900. I will read this one excerpt here. The year of 1881 marks a turning point in the history of the Jews, as decisive as that of 70 A.D. when Titus' legion burned the temple at Jerusalem. In 1492, that's when Columbus set forth. Alexander II, Tsar of Russia, was assassinated by revolutionary terrorists. The modus liberalism of his regime came to an end, meaning up to that time the Jews had been able to live comparatively without a lot of hostility toward them. And within several weeks, a wave of pogroms, which mean racial persecution, was set in motion, inspired mostly by agents of the new government, spread across Russia. For the Jews, packed into the word PALE here means into a restricted area which was limited to the Jews alone, and overflowing its boundaries, the ascension of Alexander III signified not only immediate disaster, but also the need for a gradual reordering of both their inner life and their relationship to a country in which Jews had been living for hundreds of years. The question had now to be asked, should the East Russian Empire, should the European Jews continue to regard themselves as permanent residents of the East Russian Empire, or should they seriously consider the possibility of a new exodus? Here's taken from one of the diaries. In this restricted area of settlement comprised that area of Tsarist Russia in which the Jews were legally authorized to settle. This area covered an area of about 386,000 square miles, from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. By 1897, slightly less than 4,900,000 Jews lived there, forming 94% of the total Jewish population of Russia and about 12% of the population of the area. There had already been a trickle of Jewish immigrants to America. It says there was 7,500 in the years between 1820 and 1870. So that gives you a picture here. Right after the American Revolution, thence when on immigration, and this was mainly Western European Jews. But the idea of America as a possible local for collective renewal had not yet sunk deeply into the conscience of these people. Once the Holy Alliance sealed the defeat of Napoleon and stabilized Europe as a concert of reaction, the conditions of the Russian Jews, as indeed of almost all Russians, sadly deteriorated. The region of Nicholas I from 1825 to 1855 proved to be a nightmare. Over 600 anti-Jewish decrees were enacted, ranging from expulsions from villages in which Jews had traditionally resided to a heavy censorship of the Yiddish language and the Hebrew books, from meddling with the curriculums of Jewish schools to a conscription that tore Jewish children away from parents. And here's the sad part. Often at ages between 12 and 18 for periods of up to 25 years. In his memoirs, Alexandra Herzen has unforgettably portrayed a convoy of conscripted Jewish children. You see, they have collected a crowd of cursed little Jewish boys of 8 or 9 years old. A Russian officer tells Herzen, in a village in the province of Vyatka, they just die off like flies. A Jew boy, you know, is such a frail, weakly creature. He is not used to tramping in the mud for 10 hours a day, eating a biscuit, being among strangers, no father nor mother, nor loving. They cough and cough until they cough themselves into their graves. It was one of the most awful sights I have ever seen. Those poor, poor children. Boys of 12 or 13 might somehow have survived it, but little fellows of 8 and 10, they died. Exhausted with frightened faces, they stood in thick, clumsy soldiers' overcoats with stand-up collars fixing helplessly pitiful eyes on the garrison soldiers who were roughly getting them into ranks, and these sick children, without care or kindness, exposed to the icy wind that blows unobstructed from the Arctic Ocean, were going to their graves. This is what brought about, brothers and sisters, the Exodus. I'm going to just slowly turn to another section here, which is also taken out of some diaries. Now, I don't want this to sound boresome to you, but you've got to see the picture between the years of 1850 to the turn of the century, 1905. What made all these Jews come here? If you can see this here, then when we do get back to Revelations 12, where the prophets then minister to the Jews that are in the Holy Land, and there those that are there are given 2 wings of an eagle, that she might fly into her place, into the wilderness. The word wilderness is a word that describes obscurity to the known world. That means it's got to remain a secret. How many understands that? And to think, brothers and sisters, you've got your Assemblies of God and these charismatic type of preachers I've read their booklets. They want to picture that ancient Petra city over there across the Jordan, in the country Jordan, which we've been there twice, as the legal refuge place for the woman to flee. I think, brothers and sisters, that is about as foolish as can be. Because by the way the crow flies, that's only about 100 miles. And think of the helicopter gunships that the Antichrist will have in Israel when he crosses over there. Don't you think he can send them over there and just blow them all to pieces? Sure he can. All right. Here tells you a little bit about the Jewish life just before the Exodus when they started. I'm going to just cut it short here. Jewish poverty is a kind of marvel to many, for no parallel to it can be found anywhere. This is not the poverty of the great European cities, nor is it the poverty of the Russian peasant. Jewish poverty has no idea what a factory looks like, for it exists in the chattel, where it has its origins in fathers and grandfathers who have been wretchedly poor since time immemorial. The Russian peasant, poor as he may be, is the proprietor of a small piece of land, and his condition is not hopeless. One feels that sooner or later it will improve, but Jewish poverty is utterly without a cure. The Jew has no availing means for improving his condition. This is life for Jews in the old world. But look at for the Jews now in North America. Clothing factories, he runs them. He's the president of banks and financial institutions. From nothing, he eventually came to something. Sure, it's a different generation. But you've got to realize, brothers and sisters, God did not let him exodus that old world to come to this new world for nothing. It all feeds and builds a beautiful picture. This Jewish community has a remarkable past. It walks around with 2,000 years of history on its back. It is separated from the outside world as though it were an island in the middle of an ocean. And what goes on in that world is like a splashing of surf that never reaches higher than the ankles. The members of this community are bound and shackled to one another, and should one of them wish to break away, he has no choice but to cast himself into the waves, which will carry him apart from the Jewish world forever. The Jews live in constant fear lest they stray out of the narrow cage into which their forefathers had directed. Heaven forbid, and they tend even to forsake whatever pleasure Jewish law allows them. They are constantly placing new yoke upon themselves. They hide their natural impulses. They renounce the darker elements in their nature. They have ears only for the reading of the law, eyes only for scrutinizing, sacred texts, voices only for crying, "Hear, O Israel." They regard themselves as a chosen people, and they live worse than dogs. This is written by a Jew. My. They believe in an eternal life after death, and yet it is a sufficient ideal to see them. They look upon marriage as only as bringing children into the same condition. The eternal people in Mendes' world, who live by plucking chicken feathers and furnishing holy items for the religious institutions, they die 3 times a day from hunger. But long before the world began to perceive this, the Jew with his sharp intelligence had sensed it to himself. He then realized there were only 2 ways of expressing himself. If his senses had still been fresh, he could have tried in his bitter disillusionment or to make something better of his life. But among his atrophied senses, there remained vivid only the 6th one, an overly sharp intelligence which tended to life and jeer at the contradictions of the life he was leading. And we go then to the Exodus. And there's one section of this Exodus I'm going to read to you to show you what happened. This is taken from a diary, and the writer is on the ship, in which place is thousands. We were huddled together in the passenger compartments of the ship, literally like cattle. My mother, my sister, and I sleeping in the middle tier. People being above us and below us. We could not eat the food of the ship, since it was not kosher. We only asked for hot water, into which my mother used to put a little brandy and sugar to give it a taste. Towards the end of the 14-day trip, when our bread was beginning to give out, we applied to the ship steward for bread, but the kind he gave us was unbearably soggy. Now, more than physical hardships, my imagination was occupied with the terrors of ships, especially when the foghorn blew its loud note. One morning we saw a ship passing at what seemed to me a considerable distance, but our neighbor said that we were lucky, that at night we escaped a crash only by a hair's breadth. Another ship going by. Here is a passage from an unpublished memoir of another writer. The sky was blue, the stars shining, but in my heart it was dark. When I went up on the ship, we rode 3 weeks on a freight train, so I had plenty of time to think things over. My future, where am I going, to whom, what will I do? In Grando, that's a place over in the old world, I was at least someone in the store. But America, without a language, with only a bit of education. Young people laughed and joked, even though in my heart it was like the storm at sea. And then a real storm broke out. The ship heaved and turned. People threw up, dishes fell, women screamed. But in my heart I didn't care what happened. On board the ship we became utterly dejected. We were all herded together in the dark, filthy compartment. Wooden bunks had been put up in tiers. Seasickness broke out among us. Hundreds of people had vomiting fits, throwing up, and it just goes on. And it tells in here, brothers and sisters, the Jewish movement is essentially a family movement, is shown by the great proportions of females and children. From 1899 to 1910, out of the total immigration of 1,074,442 Jews, 607,822 were males, and 466,620 were females. Between 1899 and 1910, 267,656, or practically 1/4 of all the Jewish immigrants, were children under 14 years of age. And in a total period of time, there was a little over 2 million Jews exited to the New World. Now, that had to be for a purpose. There's so much more I could read, but it would just only be boresome. But I read that to set the stage for the next reading. Now, if you don't mind, this was handed to me by Brother Jay. This is in today's paper. It's all about the New World Order. As I said, you don't even have time for a New World Order. Natural man thinks in that way. But one of these days, something is going to go berserk. Listen to this. Kalispell, Montana. This is the dilemma facing officials in this former logging center just south of the Canadian border. How can you compromise with people who believe that you want to seize their land, take their guns, and throw them into concentration camps? It's not easy, according to Steve Herbley, Flathead County's planning director. Hurley has found himself the target of accusations that he is a stalking horse for a shadowy group of world leaders who plan to take over the United States. Some people literally tell me I slip off to Denver to be debriefed by federal officials, laying the groundwork for a United Nations takeover of the United States. He said, scoffing at the notion. But the shrillness of growing opposition to any form of government regulation has many officials and residents fearing for their safety. And civil debate on issues such as building codes and a new master plan for the county has come to a grinding halt. Similar scenes are being repeated across the rural West in what some are calling the politics of paranoia, fed by the growing numbers of mostly white people who feel economically disenfranchised and in desperate need of explanations. Some experts who track extremist trends estimate that at least a few 100,000 people embrace conspiracy theories. This is a movement of people who believe that the U.S. government is part of a conspiracy to create a new world order. They say their birthright is on the verge of being taken away, and that federal officials signal their malevolent intent by crossing a constitutional boundary in their bungling of the 1993 situation near Waco, Texas, a tragedy that ended in the deaths of more than 80 Branch Davidians and 4 federal agents. These beliefs are creating new alliances. Armed citizens, militia groups are joining with anti-gun patrol patriots, conservative religious groups, and average working people who feel oppressed by government restrictions and abandoned by an economy leaving manufacturing and extractive industries such as mining behind. Bob Fletcher, spokesman for the Militia of Montana, a group gearing up for a showdown with the federal government, summed up the perceived threat. It is a merger underway for years involving the United Nations and the wealthy elite of the world, all coming together to put us under a singular one-world government, a giant dictatorship. In Utah, an influential property right group called the National Federal Lands Conference recently began to advocate the formation of citizens' militias to safeguard private property from government seizure. All parties in this alliance shunned the mass media, accusing major newspapers and TV networks of having liberal leanings and blaming them for what they see as conspiracy of silence on key issues facing America. They are turning onto a far-right lane of the exploding information highway, coming together via computer bulletin boards, faxes, videos, and a network of emerging shortwave radio opinion makers who, unlike, they mention here, Rush Limbaugh or G. Gordon Liddy, are not yet household names. The new technology has allowed people nationwide to disseminate their beliefs and locally to organize meetings on issues ranging from school curriculum to zoning controls. Now, as I said this morning, I get this stuff from everywhere. Yes, in North Carolina, there's already militia groups forming. They're spreading their literature out. And that's why I said, that's the way natural man thinks when he don't know God. But I'm thankful tonight to know God. If we didn't have God and His Word, yes, all of this other stuff, I would be alarmed about it. But I have to say, brothers and sisters, He knows all about it. Now, the next time when we go into this, we're going to deal with this lamb beast and try to show you. If there is a place prepared in the wilderness, somewhere here in North America, is that portion of the world. When I say that, then immediately people will ask, but what about this, Brother Jackson? What about that? And I'll say, before you even hear it, yeah, what about it? When we get through with it, you will know better then. A lot of people think everybody that's a foolish virgin has got to go through and have their head cut off. They don't think there's going to be any earthquakes. They don't think there's going to be any terrible sickness. They don't think there's going to be any other natural disasters that by how people can be killed. They want to keep them all for the guillotine. But the foolish virgin would die by any and all means. Because if time lasts another 15, 16, 18 years, the natural law of death will take its toll. Do you think a person 80-year-old just has to live another 20 years to get his head whacked off? To be identified as a foolish virgin? How many knows what I mean by that statement? Amen. From now on until that foolish virgin picture is shown there in Revelation, some of them are going to die by natural means. Yes, in that tribulation hour, yes. Many will die by the very bloodshed of what he can execute. But I won't say any more. We'll just leave that until the next time. So may the Lord bless you tonight, brothers and sisters.